Hi ladies and gentlemen, it's Miss Solari here. Thank you for joining me for this session of Bananas and Books. As you could tell, we're doing this one a little differently. As you know, I'm back in the library and I'm so happy to be recording this session right here in the library for all of you boys and girls instead of at home. So we're almost finished with Stargirl. In our last few chapters, Stargirl has gone through, it seems, a bit of a transformation. She's using her birth name, the name her parents gave her, Susan, and she's trying really hard to conform. And we know when we're in middle and high school, not standing out, being part of the crowd, fitting in, is very important. We don't know if she's doing it for herself because of everyone shunning her, to make her relationship with Leo last, because Leo has now also began to be ostracized and he doesn't like that. And she has this idea that if she wins the state championship speech contest, that will bring pride to Micah High, and that will put her back in good graces with the student body. So let's find out. Chapter 27. And our best wishes go to Susan Caraway. The PA announcement echoed through the school lobby and we were off to Phoenix. The driver, Mr. McShane, was the high school's faculty representative to the contest. Susan and I sat in the back. Susan's parents were driving their own car and would meet us in Phoenix. As we pulled out of the parking lot, she wagged a finger in my face. "Don't get a big head, mister. I'm allowed to invite 2 friends. You aren't the only one," I asked. "So who was the other?" I said. "Dory." "Well then, I think I'll go for a big head. Dory Dilson isn't some guy." She grinned. "No, she's not one of those." Suddenly, she unbuckled her seatbelt. We each had a back window. "Mr. McShane," she announced, "I'm moving over so I could sit closer to Leo. He's just so cute, I can't help myself." In the rearview mirror, the teacher's eyes crinkled. "Whatever you like, Susan, it's your day." She slid over and fastened the middle belt. She jabbed me. "Hear that? It's my day. I get whatever I want." "So," I said, "what happened when you asked Dory Dilson?" She said no. "She's mad at me." "I could tell," I said. "Ever since I became Susan, she thinks I betrayed myself. She just doesn't understand how important it is to be popular." I wasn't sure what to say to that. I was feeling a little uneasy. Fortunately, what to say wasn't much of a problem for me during the 2-hour ride, because Susan chatted away just like the old Stargirl would. "But I know Dory," she said, "and I'll tell you one thing." "What's that?" "She'll be in front of the mob cheering for me when we get back tomorrow." I later found out that after we left school, the principal had spoken again on the PA. He announced our expected time of return on Saturday and suggested that everyone be there to meet us, win or lose. Losing, as it turned out, never occurred to the contestant herself. "Would you do me a favor?" she said. I told her sure. "That big silver plate that goes to the winner, I'm such a klutz with dishes at home. Would you hold it for me when the crowd rushes? I'm afraid I'll drop it." I stared at her. What crowd? What rush? "In the school parking lot when we get back tomorrow. There's always a crowd waiting for the returning hero. Remember the film at school, My Vision?" She twisted her head and looked at me. She rapped my forehead with her knuckle. "Hello in there. Anyone home?" "Oh," I said, "that crowd." She nodded. "Exactly. Of course we'll be safe as long as we're in the car. But once we get out, who knows what will happen? Crowds could get pretty wild, right, Mr. McShane?" The teacher nodded. "So I hear." She spoke to me as if instructing a first grader. "Leo, this has never happened in our high school before. Having a winner of the Arizona State oratorical contest, one of their very own. When they hear about it, they're going to go wild, bananas. And then when they get a gander at me and that trophy," she rolled her eyes and did a low whistle. "I just hope they don't get out of hand." "The police will keep them in line," I joked. "Maybe they'll call the National Guard." She stared at me wide-eyed. "You think?" She didn't realize I was kidding. "Well," she said, "I'm really not afraid for myself. I wouldn't mind a little jostling." "Do you like to jostle, Mr. McShane?" In the mirror, his eyes shifted. "Never can tell. I don't know." "And if they want me to carry around on their shoulders, that's okay, but they better not." She poked me with her finger. mess with my trophy. That's why you, Leo, another poke, are going to hold it tight. I wished Mr. McShane would say something. Susan, I said, did you ever hear of counting your chickens? Before you hatch, you mean? Exactly. I hear you're not supposed to. Exactly. She nodded thoughtfully. Never made much sense to me. I mean, if you know they're going to hatch, why not count them? Because you can't know, I said. There are no guarantees. I hate to break this to you, but you're not the only person in the contest. Someone else could win. You could lose. It's possible. She thought about that for a moment, then shook her head. Nope, not possible. She threw up her arms and smiled hugely. Why wait to feel great? Celebrate now. That's my motto. She nuzzled into me. What's yours, big boy? Don't count your chickens, I said. She shuddered mockingly. Oh, you're such a poop, Leo. What's your motto, Mr. McShane? Drive carefully, he said, when you have your students. There may be a winner in the car. That set her off howling. Mr. McShane, I said, you're not helping. Sorry. I just looked at her. You're going to be in a state contest, I said. Aren't you just a little bit nervous? The smile vanished. Yes, I am. I'm a lot nervous. I just hope things don't get out of hand when we get back to school. I've never been adored by mobs of people before. I'm not sure how I'm going to react. I hope I don't get a big head. Do you think I'm the big head type, Mr. McShane? I raised my hand. Can I answer that? I think your head is just fine, said Mr. McShane. She jabbed me with her elbow. Hear that, Mr. Know-It-All? She gave me a smug face, which disappeared as she held her arms up and yelped. They're going to love me. Mr. McShane just chuckled. Silently, I gave up. She pointed out the window. Look, even the desert is celebrating. It seemed to be true. The normally dull cacti and shrubs were splashed with April colors, as if a painter had been there and dabbed our landscape with yellows and reds. Susan strained against her seatbelt. Mr. McShane, could we stop here just for a minute, please? When the teacher hesitated, she added, you said it was my day. I could get whatever I want. The car coasted to a stop along the gravelly roadside. In a moment, she was out the door and bounding to the desert. She skipped and whirled and cartwheeled among the prickly plants. She bowed to a yucca, waltzed with a cigarro. She plucked a red blossom from a barrel cactus and fixed it in her hair. She practiced her smile and her nod and her wave. One hand, two hand to the adoring mob, her hero's welcome. She snapped a needle from a cactus and with the slapstick pantomime of a circus clown, pretended to pick her teeth with it. Mr. McShane and I were leaning on the car, laughing, when suddenly she stopped, cocked her head again, and stared off in another direction. She stayed like that, stone still for a good 2 minutes, then abruptly turned and came back to the car. Her face was thoughtful. Mr. McShane, she said as the teacher drove off, do you know of any extinct birds? Passenger pigeon, that's probably the best known. They say there used to be many of them that would darken the sky. And the moa? Moa, she asked. It's a huge bird. Like a condor, I said. A condor wouldn't have come up to its knee. A moa made an ostrich look small, 12, 13 feet tall, the biggest bird. Couldn't fly. Lived in New Zealand. Killed off hundreds of years ago by people. People half their size than the moa, said Susan. Mr. McShane nodded. I wrote a report about the moas when I was younger than you. I thought they were just the neatest thing. Did moas have a voice? Susan's eyes glistened as she asked. The teacher thought about it. I don't know. I don't know if anyone will know. Susan looked out the window at the passing desert. I heard a mockingbird back there, and it made me think of something Archie said. Mr. Brubaker, said Mr. McShane. Yes. He says he believes mockingbirds may do more than imitate other birds. I mean other living birds. He thinks they may also imitate the sounds of birds that are no longer around. He thinks the sound of extinct birds are passed down the years from mockingbird to mockingbird. Interesting thought, said Mr. McShane. Beautiful thought. He says when a mockingbird sings for all, we know it's pitching fossils into the air. He says he who knows what songs of ancient creatures we may be hearing out there. The words of Archie Brubaker settled over the silence. As if reading my thoughts, Mr. McShane turned off the air condition and powered down the windows. Hair blew in a faint, smoky scent of the mesquite desert. After a while, I felt the touch of Susan's hands. Her fingers wove through mine. Mr. McShane, she cooed, we're holding hands in the back seat. Uh-oh, he said, what am I going to do with you hormonal teenagers? Don't you think he's cute, Mr. McShane? I never really thought about it, he said. Well, look, she grabbed my face and pulled it forward. The teacher's eyes looked at me in the rearview mirror. You're right, Mr. McShane laughed. He's adorable. Susan released my blushing red face. Told you, don't you just love him? I wouldn't go that far. A minute later, Mr. McShane. Now I felt something in my ear. I'm putting my finger in his ear. This sort of teenage silliness went on until we ended up round a mesa and saw the brown mist that announced our approach to the city of Phoenix. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of chapter 27, and we're seeing the new Susan, but also glimpses of Stargirl. So Susan, or Stargirl, is trying so hard to conform and fit in, but yet she had to get out of the car and just take in the desert, bowing to cacti and picking red blossoms up and asking about extinct birds and how the mockingbird might be giving us an ancient secret of old times. That's something that I think more aligns with Stargirl than Susan. She's trying so hard to conform and to fit in, but she can't help be who she truly is. Do you think she's going to win the contest? I mean, she just has a gift for speaking. If I were to make an inference, because I don't know, ladies and gentlemen, I'm reading this as I read it with you, I would think she is going to win. I just hope when she comes back that she gets the hero's welcome that she thinks she deserves and does deserve. Let's read and finish up chapter 8 to find out. I'm excited. Her parents met us in the lobby of the hotel where Susan, Mr. McShane, and I each had a room for the night. After we checked in, the 5 of us ate a buffet lunch in the hotel. Then we watched Susan board a bus that would take her and 18 other contestants to Phoenix West. There were 38 contestants. 19 gave their speech in the morning. By the end of the afternoon, 10 finalists would be chosen. The finals would take place that evening. To be honest, none of us were surprised when Susan made the finals. She's incredibly good. The surprise was this. Her speech was new. It was not the one she had given at Micah High. It was not the one she was practicing for me in front of Peter Sinkowitz and an assortment of cigarros. It was not the one I had heard the day before. But it was wonderful. There were some elements of the old speech in it, and that much of it was new as the morning. Like a butterfly, her words fluttered from image to image. She swung from the distant past, Barney, Archie's Paleocene rodent skull, to the present, Cinnamon, her pet rat, to the distant future, the death of the sun, from the most ordinary, the old man nodding off at the bench at the Tudor Village Mall, to the most extraordinary, a new discovered galaxy that will go to the end of the universe. She touched on silver lunch trucks and designer labels and enchanted plates, and when she said her best friend gave her a pet rat on his shoulder, tears came to my eyes. It was a jumble, it was a mismatch, and somehow she pulled it all together. Somehow she threaded every different thing through the voice of a solitary mockingbird singing in the desert. She called her speech, I might have heard a moa. Wow, ladies and gentlemen, I am not even kidding. I have chills as I'm reading this to you. What she learned about the moa with Mr. McShane, she wove into a beautiful speech that connects the ordinary to the magnificent and how we all play a part in this life. That's just incredible. That's Stargirl. The auditorium was half full, mostly with small groups of students and parents from the competing schools. After a contestant finished, His or her supporters whistled and whooped, as if doing so would influence the judges. The rest was polite applause. When Susan finished, the four of us managed a modest cheer, but that was about it. No whistles, no whoops. I think we were made of more timid stuff than the speech maker herself. Back at the hotel, Mr. McShane and I mobbed her, if two could be a mob. Her parents were more reserved. They were full of smiles and, "Well done, Susan." But they seemed no more surprised at her success than she did. When the adults went off to the gift shop, I had to ask myself, where did that speech come from? She grinned. "Do you like it?" "Sure, but it's not what I've been hearing for the last month." "What were you doing, practicing a secret speech on the side?" The grin got wider. "Nope. That was the first time I heard that speech, too." I stared at her. Slowly, her words sank in. "Let me get this straight. You're saying you just made it up this morning." "I'm saying I didn't even make it up. It was just there. All I did was open my mouth and let it out." She held both hands out to me and snapped her fingers. Presto. I gaped at her. "What are you going to say tonight?" She threw out her arms. "Who knows?" The five of us ate an early dinner in the hotel restaurant. Afterward, we waited in the lobby while Susan changed clothes. She stepped off the elevator wearing a peach-colored pantsuit. She slinked across the lobby modeling for us. She sat on her mother's lap and said, "My personal seamstress made it for me." We applauded for her mother lightly and sent her on the bus. The general public was invited to the evening show, and the auditorium was packed. People stood in the back. Down front, a high school orchestra played rousing music from John Philip Sousa. The 10 contestants sat on stage. 7 were boys. All of the contestants appeared to be grim and nervous, stiff as mannequins, except for Susan, who was bending the ear, just talking away of the boy sitting next to her. He nodded occasionally, but kept his eyes and spine at attention, and obviously wished that she would just shut up. Susan's parents chuckled knowingly at her behavior, while I tried to disguise a stab of jealousy. He's jealous that she's talking to another boy. But that's just who she is. She doesn't mean any harm. So he cares so much about her, he might even love her. And yet he can't be with her unless she conforms to these typical high school norms. I guess that's why high school could be so hard. One by one, the contestants took the long walk to the center stage to give their speeches. The applause was equally hearty for all. A grade school girl in a frilly white dress handed each contestant a bouquet of roses, yellow for the girls, red for the boys. While the girls cradled their roses, the 7 boys looked at them as if they were hand grenades. Susan was next to last to speak. When her name was called, she bounced up from her chair and practically ran to the microphone. She did a sprightly pirouette, a curtsy, waved her hand in a window washer motion, and said, "Hi." Accustomed to seeing stiff, mortified contestants, the audience responded with uncertain titters. They didn't know what to make of this unconventional teen any more than we had the first day of school. Several bold souls said hi and waved back. She did not begin, at least not in the usual sense. There was no ringing preamble. She merely stood there, comfortably chatting away as if we were all on rocking chairs at her front porch. Murmur drifted towards the ceiling. People were waiting for her to get started. The murmur subsided as it occurred to them that this was it and they were missing it. A quiet then fell over the auditorium. It was absolute. I was more tuned into the audience than the speaker, and if the last 5 minutes of her talk, if anyone was breathing, I couldn't detect it. When she finished with barely a whisper, "Can you hear it?" I leaned in and cupped my hand to her ear. 1,500 people inched forward, straining to hear her whisper. There were 10 seconds of pure stillness. Then she turned abruptly and went back to her chair. Still, there was no reaction. What's going on, I wondered. She sat forward in her chair, her hands folded primly in her lap. And then it came, suddenly, explosively, as if everyone had awakened at once. We were all on our feet, clapping and shouting and whistling. I found myself sobbing. The cheering was as wild as that of the crowd at our championship basketball game. And that's the end of chapter 28. We are unsure if she won, but from that reaction, I have a strong feeling that we'll find out soon, and that's going to be for the positive. I'm excited to see how this win affects Stargirl, or Susan really, at school, and if this means they can continue their romance and grow together, or if things will change. Thank you for joining me. Bye-bye.